This is Elizabeth Townsend. This is for Dean Massaro's Preparing for Lives in the Law project. It is August 13th, 2001, and this is an interview with Gloria Goldman. All right, so the first question is, why did you go to law school, and was it what you expected when you got there?
This is going to be a strange answer.
Okay.
I went to law school when I was 40, and I had been a teacher of the deaf previous to that, but I had worked probably about 15 years before I went to law school. It had been 20 years since I'd been in school. And my husband is a professional, he's an orthodontist, and he had talked about himself going to law school because you deal with law all the time in your lives, especially professionally. And he had thought about it, although it's difficult here because there's no part-time. So at one point, he suggested that maybe I would do it with him. And I said, that's fine. I had never thought about it, and I didn't even know if I was qualified. So there was a point in time in late 1987 that I had purchased some books about law school, and when he saw that, he signed me up for the LSAT, the last LSAT in December, without me knowing, and got all the applications. So the following August, I was in law school. So I came into law school not knowing I was going to law school, with no idea of what I was going to do with it. So it's much different. So I didn't have any expectations, but I had a good time because I wasn't as freaked out like the young students. And I made a decision before I came that I wouldn't allow the grade situation to affect me.
That's a good thing.
But I came in at a different time in my life, so it was easy for me to do that.
Was that a hard thing to do once you got into the atmosphere in terms of grades? There's such an atmosphere of grades.
No, because I set myself apart from that. I was like the mother to the other kids, and I did not know what I was going to do when I finished, and I was not relying on supporting a family and feeding myself when I got out to have a certain job. So I didn't really care if the top 10 law firms in the country wanted me. I wanted to get the law education and do the best I could. So I never competed for the grades like some of the students would have to do, or thought they had to do.
In this incoming class, they have 18% that are over 30. And that's a good amount. Was that the case when you were here?
There were quite a few of us. I don't know what the percentage was, but I can think of, I had several friends that were, I wasn't the oldest, but that were close to 40 and older. And some of them had the same attitude, and some of them were freaked out because of your own personal ego, remembering how well you did in school years before. But it was such a long time before, I figured I paid my dues, and I had nobody to answer to but myself. Although, when the first grades came out, I would not allow and they posted them. As you know, we used to run downstairs, that's where the students would be. I did not let my family come with me. I wanted to see them first, because I was sure there was going to be a note that says, see me, and no grades. Yeah, so you are, that first time around, so I can really sympathize with the others who are really concerned about the grades. But, yeah.
And what did you do once you got out of law school?
As I was moving through law school, I thought, okay, I'm not going to go into a big firm. They're probably not going to want me anyway, necessarily, because I did not work towards that goal. And I thought, well, maybe I'd take a job in the public sector. I graduated in the December class, because I went to summer school of 1990, and so I was in the May 91 class, really. That was a time where a lot of the large firms had downsized, and a lot of the public sectors were freezing jobs and also taking people with experience, because there were a lot of people who had experience that were out there looking for jobs. It was right after the real estate debacle of the 80s and Keating and problems like that. So I applied to, I think I applied to the Pima County Attorney's Office, and they froze the jobs. I applied to different places, and I noticed that nothing was happening quickly, so I could afford to do what I wanted to do. So once I passed the bar, I decided I would open up a small firm, just solo. Narrow what I was doing to just a couple of very narrow areas of law that I could just learn step by step and use mentors if I needed to. So the first thing that came to mind was immigration law, because not many people did it then, and really not so many people do it now. And it kind of fit my personality. Although I didn't really know what I was getting into, I kind of felt, I'm an immigrant, I could do this. And so that was a narrow area that I figured I would start by doing, and it lends itself to pro bono work, so that's the way you obtain your mentors, by offering yourself to the projects in the community. And I also picked what was a hot area of law at the time, and it continues to come up and down, is bankruptcy, just to do some simple bankruptcies. I did a little bit of civil, but not much. I didn't have to feed myself from this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to pay rent, so I was in a much different position than most people that get out of school. And my husband loaned me money to open my practice, so I didn't have to go to the bank and say, give me money. And I paid that money back for the first at least year. I used his copy machine. You know, it was very small, and it was step by step. Within a year or two, I stopped doing anything but immigration law.
So tell me, okay, so I am a student, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm a student. I think that is so what I want to do. Can we talk more about sort of your, you graduated in December. What exactly, I mean, how did you go about doing all? I mean, you just said that, but sort of on a more
I graduated
specific
in
level.
December, and I was hoping to get a job in the public sector.
Right.
And I did make applications,
Right.
thinking I'll just go to work for the prosecutor's office.
Right.
I wasn't much into defense at that point because I was just my age and the time of my life. And I discovered that the job situation, even in the public sector at that time, was tough. So my husband and I spoke, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, I got the degree, I ought to do something with it.
Right.
So we decided that I could just start my own firm. So I right away, and I decided I'd pick a couple of areas of law to concentrate in. One that not a whole lot of people do, but also lends itself into asking people for help, especially if you're doing pro bono work. Because you don't want to call an attorney up who's your competitor and say, help me do this because I'm going to be your competitor. You don't want to do it that way. You want to, yeah, that might become irritating to some people. Although I knew a lot of attorneys in town and they were very helpful, but not in immigration law. Not many of them did it, and I didn't know any of the people that practiced immigration law. And then I picked bankruptcy because it seemed like it was the hot area of law, and I knew I could learn just the basics. I wouldn't take any cases until I understood it, and I figured I'd take some CLE courses. So I incorporated myself, made myself a professional corporation. I researched what you need to do to open a business, get a business license. I rented an office downtown, a small office in the Transamerica building, actually, which also had the availability of copy machines and different things that you have there, notaries and people, so you don't need to have any assistants in your firm. And I started taking Spanish, although I still have Spanish because I got busy right away and I don't have time to practice. I can understand a bit, but I need to send myself somewhere 10 years down the line. So I had tutors, for a long time, actually. And so anybody who didn't speak English, although most of the clients either speak English or bring somebody with them, we would get someone from my husband's office to translate, or I just wouldn't do the case. It just depended on how somebody felt about that. I took a loan from my husband so I could buy the computer, and I looked into the different, what would I need? Well, I had a computer in law school. WordPerfect was fine. The program was fine. And I got a forms program for bankruptcy. I ordered one and I went right away to one of the bar meetings to see who the vendors were and figure out what I needed in terms of purchase. I did not buy any programs for immigration yet. I waited until for a couple of years. I think there are forms programs and research programs that you can purchase. I looked into there were a couple of very well respected, and they continue to be, attorneys in town who do immigration law, and I called up and took them to lunch and introduced myself to them, and they were very nice.
Okay, so when you call, hold on.
Yeah, I know.
So you figure out who they just call them out of the blue and say, what did you say when you called
I said, hi. I introduced myself and said that I've just opened a practice and I'm going to practice immigration law, and I would like to meet them, take them to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both very nice. I'm sure they were a little like a competitor,
right.
But they soon found out that I didn't bother them for things either, because I didn't know them well, and I wouldn't do that to them. I found out from one of them that the best organization, if you're going to be practicing this area of law, to join is the American Immigration Lawyers Association, because they publish a lot of the books that are helpful. They have very excellent CLE, and they have a wonderful mentor program. So if you want to get mentoring, you can call somebody in North Carolina who doesn't know you, maybe, rather than, and that's not, I mean, that was not his goal in telling me. But that was very helpful. That was probably the best thing I ever did. It's a great organization. And then the next year, it took a year, but then I did go to their annual meeting. 4 days of intensive CLE. It's like going back to school. It's wonderful. And you can pick and choose. And I called Andy Silverman and told him I was doing this. So he made a couple of suggestions also to me as to who to contact. And so you start to network. And of course networking is really important no matter where you are in law, so that you can learn who's in the community, especially if you're in your own practice, but no matter what. So I took them out to lunch and got to know them so that they knew who I was. And over a period of time, I would meet with them on occasion. I just let them know how I'm doing, and then I would ask them some questions, because I had no idea, like, if you have a case in the immigration court, which is an administrative court, where is it, and what do you file, and where do you pay the fees? Those are the things you learn by doing pro bono. The students I've mentored in this who have thought that they would want to do this, I've told them, you have to, or the people, there have been people who have come to town who have decided, there's one in particular about a year ago, who is a gentleman who's 50, but decided he was going to come here and he was going to practice immigration law, something he was interested in doing. So I told him, the first thing you do is you join this American Immigration Lawyers Association, and the second thing you do is you contact, and I told him what the projects were, and offer your services, because you'll learn the ropes at that end. Okay, so I started by contacting Southern Arizona Legal Aid, and my first case, they asked me to take a case, and they had mentor people to help me with it, that defended somebody who was being deported who had some criminal convictions. And actually at that time there was no court in Tucson, so it was we did it in Phoenix. So I had to learn the whole, and I went and watched the other attorney do one of her cases, actually in Phoenix, so I could see how that was done. And the second thing I did was I was meeting with different people who had interest in immigration law. At the time there was TECLA, and they were the group that worked with the Central American refugees. And that's pretty much what they did. So I went and visited with the person who was then the director of that program. And so she told, I had another connection then. I went in my Rolodex, here's another person I can call. And I took probably an asylum case from them, or more than, I'm sure more than one. And it kind of went like that. You know, you're just kind of out there, and at first, I don't think I ever took a paycheck for myself for at least 2 years. So it's a really different situation from most. This is very different.
So
but there are ways to do it otherwise, yeah.
And did you have pro bono cases that during those 2 years? Is that all you did during those 2 years?
No, I had for fee. I started to get, I only took, when I learned to do the deport case, I pretty much just did deport case. I don't know if I did any for fee asylum. I did take some cases where you charge them a fee, but you let them pay a little bit. I have a woman, I started her and her son's case back in probably 1994 or 5, $30 a month. I still get my $30 a month. And I did a lot of things on payment plan, and most of the people were great. I did not ask for big upfront fees, and my fees were lower then. I still do a lot of pro bono. I started a case this morning with no question, in fact, and then I probably have one coming in. That's always a major component of my practice, especially in the position I'm in. Yeah. So it's just little by little. It's very different for, you know.
So tell me your first day, like with a client or in court, like what you think of as your first day of like really doing this.
My first day with a client, one of my first days with the client, my first days with the client, I'll give you a couple of examples. They'd come in and I'd pretty much not know what they're talking about. So I was real careful, you know, and I'd take notes and I'd say, I'll call you back. And I didn't charge for consults, so I didn't charge for consults for a long time, and I do now only because I'm just so busy. So they want to see me, and they get a lot of information in a consult. It's like, I'll give you a call in a day or two, and then I'd get on the phone to try to figure it out. So here are a couple of examples. And, oh, by the way, when I called Andy Silverman, he suggested I contact the officer in charge of immigration in Tucson, And I did, and he's wonderful. And I went to his office and met him in person. And I thought I could take him for lunch, but he's a government official, and some of them do not like, they don't want to be seen for lunch with you unless you're with the whole group, because it's not right. So I tried to take him for dinner, for lunch, I was being my PR person, and then I realized after about a year that that will never happen unless we're doing a meeting. So I got to know him pretty well, and he gave me all the phone numbers and took me around, and I met the deportation officer, and I met the investigator, and I met all the different people. And I used to hand file all the papers to immigration myself. So I got to know the women at the desk, and I would learn things from them, and I got to know who they were, because there's so much. There's forms, there's what jurisdiction are you in. There are times you're in the jurisdiction of the Immigration Service. If someone's in court, that's a different jurisdiction. So you have to really be careful how you subdivide it. So
do you think that we have a lot of people talking about these kind of things? Do you think this is stuff that's what you're supposed to be learning once you get out of law school, or do you think it's something that, I mean, did you have immigration classes here? Do you think that's part of what should be taught at school, or
maybe
not?
part of it, but procedures change, especially when you're dealing with the federal government. So whoever's teaching it can talk about it now. Sometimes it doesn't mean anything till you're doing it. Okay, so I think the most meaningful thing for the students is the fact that they have the clinic programs now. They're not all going to know what they want to do when they get out. They may have a feeling about what they want to do, but if they got involved with the clinic programs and there's more support for them, and that's difficult, I think that's where they're going to learn certain sectors of it. Like in the clinic program here for immigration, they pretty much learn about people in removal proceedings or who are in detention in Florence. They know nothing about all the rest of it. And there's a whole lot of the rest of it. But some people only practice that area of immigration law. And when I first began, I didn't do any business immigration. I did not represent any high-tech workers or doctors or all the different people I've done since that time for a long time, because I felt that was more complicated, and that would be something that is not pro bono, and I would be going to colleagues for the information. So I felt I needed to be out there, take the courses, do a lot of reading, understand what I was reading. Often you're reading this stuff and it doesn't even make any sense. The first CLE course I went to, I understood about 1/8 of what they were saying. It was like, and I was sitting next to another guy who was new. We're going, what's the BIA? I thought the BIA was the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Well, it's not. It's the Board of Immigration Appeals, or BALCA. I mean, they were just coming up with all these things, and it's like, oh my God. So I'm thinking, I don't know how much of that, but maybe some. I think Professor Silverman teaches a very good basic course, and it's a lot to teach 2 days a week for one semester. It's quite a bit, just based on what the law looks like and the fact that you have to know about regulations, and then after that there's more. So I'm not sure that, maybe through the clinic, or maybe if there was a program where you can bring people in, but I don't know how meaningful it would be. I'd love to talk to students. How meaningful it is until you're doing it is difficult sometimes, yeah.
So, how long did it take till you started to feel comfortable with all? I mean, once you
Comfortable with it all?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, after I was practicing for a year, and I called a friend who in Boston, she's a school psychologist, and I said to her, maybe it was even 2 years. I said, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I mean, when people come in, and believe me, I did not take the cases unless I felt I knew what I was doing or someone was showing me. I did not feel I had a handle on it for probably about a year. And then I started to, I'm not sure exactly when it happened. And believe me, there are days like today. I saw a client today, I've been practicing 10 years. I saw a sister of a person who's going to be deported, and he really has a big problem. And I called 3 other attorneys when I was done speaking to them because I felt they were out of luck. But before I made my final decision, I spoke to an attorney in Cleveland, attorney in Miami, and I called the INS attorney here. So I don't think in most anything you do, you always feel like you know it all. And in this particular area of law, if you think you know it all, it's a big mistake. You need to do your research, but I think that's in any area.
So when you call these people, how do you start?
Well, these are colleagues.
Friends, so
yeah,
they know.
One of them, because this particular area of law really lends itself to solo practice. Some people practice in large firms. They're employment lawyers who do. They do the high-tech workers. They don't do a lot of the other stuff that I do. I do the whole realm of it. But they're there and they're a part of a firm, although they might be the only one in the firm doing it. us who are solo connect up with others who are solo. So I have lots of good friends here. One of my greatest days in my law practice is the day my mentor here told me he was not my mentor, that I was his mentor, and that we were colleagues. So we have colleagues. But my friend in Cleveland is solo, so we call each other all the time because we deal with some complicated cases. The one in Miami actually is moving here, and I'm looking forward to her being here. I just met her, and she's practiced 10 years, and it's nice to see other people coming. And this was just such a horrible case. It involves some really serious criminal conviction, but you also have a person who's had his green card since he was like a year old, who is probably going to be deported to Mexico for the rest of his life.
Then he has no
He has no relief. And I want to make sure that the family doesn't spend a whole lot of money on this, with somebody trying to figure that out. So I'm going to spend a little more time based on the consultation to tell them one thing that they ought to try, but they ought to save their money and help him reestablish. Because it was a serious conviction. And unless he can get that set aside because the public defender pled him, he's gone. It's really shocking. Yeah. So let me tell you about my first case that I can remember. A person calls me up and says her sister's fiance is in Florence, which is a detention center, and they want me to represent him in a bond hearing. And at the time, now it's not so, bond is very limited now in immigration cases, but at that time it was much more available. And I tried to tell her, I said to her, I forget what I told her, but I tried to send her on because I had no idea what to do in this particular case. But she insisted that no, they wanted me to do it, maybe because I wasn't as expensive hourly as somebody would have been. So I called Tekla, and I said to them, they want me to do a hearing to redetermine the bond. And the bond had been set at $25,000, which was an exorbitant amount of bond. Because I asked her, had he been convicted? What was going on? No, he got picked up in the airport here, and he had been coming from New York. He's Jamaican, and he was illegal. I couldn't quite figure out how he got picked up in the airport here because he had been on a flight from New York, not an international flight. So Lynn Marcus, I spoke to Lynn Marcus because at the time she was doing the Southwest project, Refugee Rights Project. She says, there's got to be something more to this, $5,000. So and you could do bond hearings by phone, okay? So I took a retainer of like $500 and my hourly, I can't remember what it was. And I said to the sister-in-law, and she came in and she signed my retainer agreement and all that and gave me some more information, that I would return the rest of the money if we got it quick over the phone for an hour. No, we would just hold the $500 in trust. So, and she's telling me, they couldn't figure it out. They didn't know why. His fiance is a U.S. citizen. He was going to marry her or something. Okay. So get on the phone. I'm on the phone with the judge. And the judge I say to the judge, I'd like to request that this bond be lowered or let him out in his own recognizance. And then the government, I could hear him in the distance, saying something about dogs and sniffing and money. That's all I could hear. And she said to me, did you hear what the government attorney said? I says, well, I heard something about dogs and sniffing and money. I didn't hear drugs. But she says, well, I think that maybe you'll want to come in here. He has a hearing on Friday. This was like Wednesday. You might want to come in and be here at his actual in person and see the client. So get off the phone. I call the sister back. I says, you forgot to tell me some stuff. What was with the dogs? Oh, well, there were dogs in the airport, and they sniffed out $6,000 in cash. So, money smells like drugs. And when they stopped him and the dogs stopped, they were stopped on a belief that they were carrying drugs. And then what happened was they seized the money, I'm not sure why, and they found out that he was illegal. So they grabbed him and put him up in Florence. So I said to her, were they dealing in drugs? No, they weren't dealing in drugs. Of course, I was asking questions maybe that I shouldn't have even been asking. Well, what were they coming to Tucson for? They were coming to go for shopping. I didn't ask them what. But it was around Christmas. I said, from New York? Shopping is better in New York.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, now the $500 is used. I'm going up to court. So I put my little red suit on. I've never been in immigration court before, and this is in the detention center. So I got there a little early, and all the prisoners are in there because they're all waiting for their initial hearings, their master hearings, and their different colored jumpsuits. If you're a criminal alien, you have one color, and if you're, okay. So take a look, and they're all Hispanic except one black. I know that that guy's got to be the Jamaican, because I know which one the client is. So I'm there, and the judge was not in the room yet, and there were people from the Florence Project, which is this wonderful project. I introduced myself to them and asked them a couple of procedure in front of the judge. And then I went over to the government attorney, because I didn't see anything on this guy. And the order to show cause is the charging document. I wanted to see, like, is there anything about drugs in there? To an amount, because they would agree to amounts. I said, sure. He said, well, how much can your client pay? I said, I don't know. So I went over this guy, I forget his name, and I said, how much is the most you can come up with for bond? And I think it was $2,500. So I went over, and he stipulated. The government attorney, a little bit lazy about this. And then I had the nerve to ask the judge about the money, although the money was not with him. It was with the Pima County prosecutor's office. And that was it. The guy got bonded out. And then I'm still his attorney. And, of course, his case was then set to be heard in Tucson through change of venue. And he never showed up. And he was deported. I think it was a very strange case. There might have been an investigation going on. But I withdrew because the people at the house were gone. I was getting my letters back. So that was one of my first cases. And it was different.
What was your hardest moment early on?
My hardest moment early on?
Or now, or whenever. I mean, but...
You mean in terms of how to address a case?
Or dealing with clients or any of it. I mean, any of it. Just something that... I mean,
well, I think the hardest thing in this area of law, just in general, is people's lives are in your hands, and you're sitting in the court sometimes, and often the cases deal with a discretion of a judge, and you just feel really terrorized by it. And I think each of those moments are always hard. Of course, if they're resolved, it's great. The clients are not, the hardest thing with clients is to make sure they understand that a lot of what I do are processing things through government, through the INS, and processing times and delays are horrible. And often they ask questions about things that are stupid, but you have to respond. And then they think you're stupid. Your client often thinks, well, what did you miss in the file? So I think the hardest thing with clients is making sure you communicate. And sometimes when you think you're communicating properly, they still don't understand. So I think it's just keeping track of everything. I don't know. But knowing early, always not knowing. But the thing that everyone needs to remember is everyone was once there, and you shouldn't be afraid to ask anybody. And there's no stupid question anytime. You just want to make sure that you're not taking something that is much too difficult. Or if you are, that you're going to be with somebody who's going to mentor you or do the case with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. We've heard a lot about, like, I didn't know where the courthouse was. I didn't know those basics. And
right. Well, maybe that's something.
It's nice to know that so many people, that's just part of the beginning.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not sure, if they told you where the federal courthouse was when you were in law school and then it moved because it did, then it's not there anymore and the phone numbers have changed. But I think what's important that maybe law school should teach us is that when you get out, you ought to be a member of the Pima County Bar Association, which is not required. That you ought to get involved so that you get to know people. So I was I'm involved now, but not as involved locally as I am on a national basis, although in a sense I am locally too. But you always should stay involved because that's your way of knowing, and being able to communicate. I think the biggest mistake I see in law, in people in law and in attorneys is they're not clear to the clients when they are their attorney and when they're not their attorney. What their case is all about and keeping in touch with them and responding to them. And if you check with the state bar in terms of complaints, that's where you'll see most of your complaints.
What do you mean by when you're the attorney and when you're not?
Well, I'll give you an example of a case I just did. The woman and her husband were coming across the border. They both had green cards since they were like 30, but they never became citizens, which is kind of stupid not to do that, but they didn't. And she was with her husband, her mother-in-law, and their 3-year-old. I think her 18-month-old was with her mother in Phoenix. And unbeknownst to her, her husband's a drug dealer. It's pretty clear. And he had a large chain taped to the gas tank of this car. This is really the stupid criminal, because they use mirrors when you're coming through, especially I don't know if they do it every time, but you have a good chance of them checking. And of course, Customs came, arrested her husband, interviewed her and her mother-in-law, and decided they knew nothing. But immigration at the border has they can use a thing called reason to believe. And the officer of Customs did, but I have reason to believe you're a drug dealer too. And you have a choice. So you can give up your card, or you can go to jail. So this young girl with her 3-year-old gave up her card. What would any other mother do? This is really interesting. And she goes back to Mexico. And then she comes back in a couple days later. She gets waived in. She didn't make a false claim to citizenship. Sometimes they do that, okay? She arrives in the country. Nobody, and they had hired a criminal defense attorney for her husband. Now, she's from Calexico, California. And much of her family's in Phoenix, but her husband is being held in Florence at the state prison pending his trial with no bond out, because he's no bond out for a lot of reasons. And they hired a criminal defense attorney here who said to her, don't worry about because she got a notice at her home that she had a hearing last August up in Phoenix in immigration court. So the attorney told her that he works with an immigration attorney in Phoenix and they'll take care of it. And they paid this or at least $5,000 to this attorney to deal with her husband's case. And I think she assumed part of that money would be to take care of her immigration problem. And in fact, she spoke to the attorney in Phoenix over the phone. To her, and I did speak to him about this, but she never signed a retainer with him, and he never signed any paperwork that he said he was her lawyer. But the attorney down here, by the way, the attorney down here has been disbarred, but not because of this case, but for other problems. So that gives you a picture of the situation. He told her not to worry about appearing at court, that they would take care of it. So no one appeared at court. So guess what? She got deported in absentia. So I get this emergency call. I see her at like 7 o'clock in the morning with her sister-in-law, and I'm telling her about her husband being deported. I had her crying all over. I said, your husband's guts. If they don't get this case dismissed, he's in Mexico for the rest of his life. I just want you to know about that. And then I had to do this we had to do a bar complaint to get the case reopened. I called my colleague in Phoenix, because I know him, and I said, what happened here? He says, well, she was not my client. I says, well, I thought she was your client. Did you talk to her? I said, I would have sent her a letter. Send a letter saying, if I don't receive a retainer, you are not my client. He said, well, he doesn't have time for that. I said, why don't you print a whole bunch of those forms up? So we did not file a bar complaint on him because she really didn't have a legal relationship with him. But we did against the other attorney. Got the case reopened, and now I have her case in chief this October. But that's, that's a big boo-boo. That's a big boo-boo, communication. And I don't seek these, but I had another case where the attorney would not tell the client when her hearing was. Her family kept calling. She had given him her only notice of her hearing. Maybe you or I would have made another copy, but people have faith in the attorney. They pay him money. They believe he's going to take care of it. She thought it was July 26th. This is several years ago, 1995. It was July 25th. She didn't go. He goes to court. He showed up, and he tells the judge and the government attorney that he had an uncooperative client. If you knew this woman and her family, that was absolutely a lie. Not only was this guy disbarred, but he also, we think, committed suicide. He died. So I don't know how I find these cases. But not because of our complaint. It happened, there were many, many other things he had done, and he dabbled in a lot of areas. Law, that's another problem. Dabbling is not a good idea. So not today, not the way law used to be 50 years ago, or even 25 years ago. So anyhow, she gets deported in absentia, and he tells her family, yeah, the judge deported you, but don't worry about it, because I can get it reopened. I have 90 days. He had 6 months. I have 6 months. But he forgot to tell her, or he didn't know, that in order to get it reopened, you have to either have ineffective assistance of counsel, you didn't get the notice, or you were brain dead that day. I mean, you were in an accident. It has to be, the circumstances have to be clear. Well, he committed fraud upon the court. He got the case reopened. It took me, let me tell you, I just won her case a few months ago. It took that many more years, because what happened was, by the time I got her case reopened and we were back in court, the immigration law had changed, and the anti-terrorism bill had been passed. And anyone who had been convicted of a drug crime, and her crime was a drug crime, believe me, she pled guilty to something she probably didn't even do, but she was convicted of a drug crime. Never went to jail. The law changed, and she had no more relief, so she got deported a second time, and I had to go on appeal again. And I told the family, at the first level of appeal is the Board of Immigration's appeal. Her issues were mainly constitutional, the right to effective counsel, all kinds of things. She turned herself into immigration. So there's some due process issues. The law was a certain way. She anticipated certain things. And the anti-terrorism bill killed that, although there's been changes in the law since that time, and that's what's helped her. So I explained that we may not win at the board. We may have to go to the Ninth Circuit with this case. So this cost this family a lot of anguish and a lot of trouble. So the mother of 4 children or 5 children. She has grandchildren, but her 2 youngest kids were young. One was like, they were both when I started in elementary school, really nice kids. Her oldest son went to Pitzer on scholarship. This is a hardworking, just to give you an idea of the family, hardworking people, not sophisticated, really messed up. My sister was a drug dealer, by the way. So then the Immigration Reform Act that came into being, IRA, in September of '96, further obliterated all of her defenses. But then there was a lot of fight. People were appealing before her. And when the case came down that helped me bring her case back from the board, I filed the motion to reopen. So you have to stay up on the law. You have to know where your clients are, so I can reopen this case and I can finally have our day in court. And we finally had our day in court and won.
How do you keep track of all of that?
I devised my own system. I have a different docket system. I have an Excel program that keeps a list of all my current clients that we review, and so I have what country they're from and what case. That's not that does not spark me that I have to do something, but they're all there. So if I see a law come down that might affect one of them, I can go through and sort through it. But I know a lot of those cases pretty well. We calendar everything in my calendar, in my secretary's calendar. Then I have a deadline book that we calendar, and then I also have my own physical one. So I have it about 4 different ways. That's another thing that attorneys get messed up on. And in this area of the law, there are a lot of deadlines. Like we have to file for extensions for things. So you have to do it before the old visa expired. So there are all kinds of little things. So you have to really stay on it and have good assistance. But I think what's real important too is assistants come and go. Even if you're a great employer, one of mine went to Harvard Law School and is now making $160,000 a year. So, they come and go. And if you have to have a handle on your practice at all times and understand what they're doing, be in charge of what they're doing. And sometimes I have seen it the other way around, where they begin to control the practice. And if you even wanted to let someone go, you can't because you don't know how to quite do it, because you wouldn't know how to find anything or do anything. So I keep lists. My assistants have lists that I review every day, so I know whose cases they're working on and what they're doing for that case. So, and I archive those for a long time.
What about research stuff as a solo practitioner? Do you see yourself, solo practitioner as like Lexis and Westlaw and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I did Westlaw for a while. I don't have to do much. For a long time, I farmed out my appeals, because you can only be good at certain things, and some people are a really great appeals writer. I'm not sure I'm I don't feel that comfortable with appeals, although I'll do them on occasion. It's hard to farm them out because not a lot of people know immigration law. So for a while I had Westlaw. I have some CD-ROM programs. I spend a lot of money on having what the latest is. As a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, we are open to we can do research through that, and we know what's going on in the law day by day. We have an infonet. I go on it every morning. But I just did purchase Lexis again. I have Lexis again. So I have the basic Lexis for an immigration lawyer, so it's a flat fee. Mm-hmm. So it's not by the hour, so it's like $140 a month. Mm-hmm. It's worth it. But I also have a couple CD-ROM systems that I use too. I'm probably oversaturated with what I need. I probably have one of the best immigration libraries around, because I spend a lot of money on it, because I think that's important. Yeah.
Do you think it's important if you're a solo? Is that one of the advices you'd give?
I would say if you're going to be solo, that you want to make sure you have enough money to have at least the basic treaties, in your area of law that updates you, and that you are engaged to some kind of service that updates you on a monthly basis. For example, Andy Silverman told us in immigration law, interpreter releases was the thing. It comes out every week, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I ordered that right away. It's like, now it's over $600 a year, but it's worth it. At first I didn't understand most of what they were talking about, but there was always something in it that I could understand, and then it
Mm-hmm.
continues to happen. So
how much do you think solo, I mean, I know it's by field, it varies, but how much do you think you spend on a library, or how much, if you're a solo practitioner, do you think that?
per year?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm doing Lexis at $140 a month, so whatever that is, maybe
Right.
about $1,500 a year for that. Then I have a couple of CD-ROM systems that probably run maybe about, each of them about $1,000 a year to keep me up, and then I do interpreter releases, but I'm got more than I need. I would say that maybe about $2,500 a year would be fair. If students today are very computer savvy. There's so much on the web and internet
Mm-hmm.
that one of the things, even while in law school, is to take the courses that help you understand where you can find things, because you can find certain cases even a certain way if you can take the time. My son became a lawyer. I have a practice in New York, and he's doing what I do, so we have this relationship that's very close, because he calls about 100 times a day. He has a great, he's got the mentor made from heaven, his mother. But he's real savvy on, he can find things on the internet that are unbelievable. And I have him do a lot of research all the time. What if this is going on, what's, in all kinds of little situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about billable hours? Do you have a lot of issues with that?
See, I do, most of what we do in immigration law is flat fee, a lot of it, for several reasons. First of all, people seem to be used to that, but you're dealing with people from other countries, and they don't understand. They want to see approximate end result. Not everything's 100%. So a lot of it's flat fee. I hate the ones where I have to figure out the hours, and I try to underestimate rather than overestimate. But I think that's a big problem for lawyers, but I think that's a part of their training in a large firm. In a solo firm, you just have to, I have, in my file, our files are set up so I have like a little form on the side. On this date I did this,
Mm-hmm.
and you can put the amount of time you spent right on there. And I purchased time slips. See, I went to the state bar meeting right away and took a look at, I don't know where I saw it, but that's a real nice program for, I think, for law offices, accounting offices, because when you're on hourly or flat fee, you can set it up for each of the clients. It's a real good billing system. So time slips is what I've used.
What about malpractice insurance?
Real important, even in this area of law. First of all, we're not always representing just some people that are being deported who may not necessarily go after you, but we're dealing with companies. I bought what was typical, and I think through the state bar or whatever I found. Actually, no, I didn't. My husband's an orthodontist, and I think my first malpractice insurance was the same as what he had through Poland Brown or whatever. Okay. Then the American Immigration Lawyers Association decided they would do a group insurance. So AILA has an insurance that's underwritten by Lloyd's of London out of Chicago, Complete Equity, and that's the company I've been purchasing from. And I've had, in my 10 years, I had one time where I was threatened by this really miserable lawyer where one of his employees left the company. And I was hired, I'm trying to remember, it was real clear, and he said I should have known that he was leaving, and I should have told him because he was on a temporary work visa. And he sued the guy, actually. He sued the employee for leaving because he went to another company and took a lot of the other employees. So he was threatening me. I think what happened is they were trying to find a deep pocket in this and figured my insurance would pay for this litigation. And I contacted my carrier immediately and sent things, but they never sued me, and it was real clear that they had no basis for the lawsuit.
And as a solo practitioner, how expensive? I mean,
it's been, at first it was like $1,100. It was really cheap because you have no history. But every year it gets higher because a lot more things can happen. people can discover later on what you did. So I think I'm spending about, and I have 2 offices, and I'm paying for the other office too. I think it was like about $3,000 this year. You make the deductible larger. And I've not had a state bar complaint. I did have a lady write a letter about me because I was mean to her, but she said I was a good lawyer. It was really ridiculous. It was the most ridiculous thing.
Tell me about it.
I forget what she did. It was really horrible. I met with her for free. I responded to her and I gave her very precise information about the case. And I was not her attorney. I was never hired. And I'm not sure exactly what happened, but she called, and I don't know if she was rude to one of my employees. I do not tolerate rudeness to my employees. And I got her on the phone, and I just kind of let her have it. I think I was a little heavy-handed, too. I probably won't do that again. So she wrote this really ridiculous letter to the state bar complaining about me doing this, but in the letter talked about that I was a great attorney. It was really bizarre. And they did not even investigate the case. It wasn't even a formal bar. I'm not sure what she was doing, but I got a copy of it. So I thought about how I talked to her. So it was a good education about maybe how I might have wanted to handle it differently.
How would you have handled it?
I probably would have just answered her questions, told her that, if she was rude to my office, I would have said that I prefer she not be rude, and then write her something, reviewing with her, and I've done this before, what I was hired to do or whether I was hired and what were the expectations for me. And you can't demand from the office if I'm not hired to do any more, or ignore it. Is the other way.
You've mentioned a couple times letter writing, how and that it's important as a communication tool for clients.
Well, often when you tell them things, they don't remember, and he said thing. So you want to memorialize to a file what's been said. So you take notes, and maybe you wrote it in the file, but you want to make sure that they have it, or you have a copy of what they had, in case they misunderstood. So it's as clear as it can be. So that's real important. Yeah.
What about getting clients? How do you, does that just
first,
happen?
yeah, well, it takes a while. What I did at first is I went to a lot more meetings so people could know I was out there doing what I did. And I belonged to different networking things. And then, I'm trying to remember anything else. I don't like advertise, I didn't advertise on any Spanish or Mexican stations, because I don't speak Spanish, and I never have, because I felt that's unfair to do that. Let the attorneys who speak Spanish do that. But I did have, ads maybe in, I'm trying to remember, that said immigration lawyer, not a whole lot. I think it was just little by word of mouth. More than it, or being in the yellow pages. The yellow pages. Believe it or not, a lot of people use the yellow pages to call a lawyer, especially in immigration if they don't know. Yeah. And I identified every criminal defense attorney there was through the Pima County Bar Association, their book, their telephone book. And I did a general letter introducing my practice and saying if they had a criminal alien client and they wanted to discuss it, they could call me, and I put my card in there and I put my announcement in there, and I did that. I'm not sure if anything happened with that. And then I did the same thing with business immigration lawyers business lawyers or employment lawyers at some point, and just different things like that. Yeah.
Interesting. I had a question. Oh, have you ever been scared of a client? We've asked that a couple people.
Not very often, but there was one. I'm trying to remember the one guy that was really angry, this drug dealer. He had a terrible case, and I took it, although I explained to him, he was a drug trafficker. He would have no relief today, by the way, but he'd had his green card a long time. He was separated from his wife, because you have to show family ties in this trial, and he had a prior. And the prior was it was not drug trafficking, but if you looked at what it was embezzlement or something, but it was really drug trafficking. So he had a couple strikes against him. So it was a hard case. And the judge was mad because he wasn't really supplying a lot of support to his family, and he was separated. So the judge ordered him deported, and then we appealed. When the appeal was dismissed several years later, we called him. He was angry. He wanted his file, and he was a little belligerent. He made me a little nervous, but he was okay. I'm in a house. I moved, after I'd been downtown for a year, I moved up to an office, which is in a house behind my husband's office, because we own the house, and we're right off Viner Road. So we've had people like some strange people like that are walking down the road. We keep the door locked, and we have a system where you can press a button. If they press you can press a button and see who's at the door. I don't use it very often, but you can know who's outside. But I've never called 911 or anything like that, and I don't keep weapons in my office. I'm trying to, not really. Yeah, I haven't had.
Was there any time, particularly early on, but any time where you thought about a case later and thought you might have done it differently, or that it was hard to figure out which way to go on something, or?
You do that, okay? I've never thought that, oh my God, I really blew it. Because if I blew it, I will tell my client. I'll tell you about the case where I thought I blew it, but it all worked out. Because I feel you have to be candid, and I think, that's what you have the insurance for. People make mistakes. I think the biggest mistake is to try to cover up a mistake. I think that's where you're going to have a problem, is covering up a mistake. I review the cases all the time, and sometimes I have to cut myself when I go to bed. It's like, leave it alone, because you can take different avenues, and that's why you want to talk to other people to try to figure out the different avenues you can take in a case. The one time where I blew it, I really did, is when I had a client who was ordered deported. Because the law had changed, frankly, and he would have been. Well, what happened was actually he was ineligible under the old law. Well, he might have been eligible under the old law. But he was in this limbo time, and I asked the court to redo him under the new law because he would have had relief, and he didn't under the old law in this gray area. And the judge denied it, so we were going up on appeal. And you have 30 days to provide your notice of appeal in writing to the Board of Immigration Appeals. It's not that hard to do. It just, you can plead, the judge abuses discretion, and you might put a little on it. It's very simple, because then you get a briefing schedule later on. It's a year usually. But there's a deadline. The judge gives you that deadline, 30 days from the day of the hearing. And I calendar that. I do that myself. That's my job. I don't know what happened, but my notice of appeal went in 3 days late. I didn't notice it. Nobody noticed it. The government never even said anything. And I got the briefing schedule. We briefed this case. We paid an attorney to do the research in the briefing of this case. And while the case was, when it finally got to somebody to review, is when they dismissed the whole entire appeal because of the lateness of the notice. It's like, okay, you just did it. Okay, so this is where somebody needs to do a bar complaint on me. There's no doubt. But also, the law, there was a change in the law, and the way I don't know if the Board of Immigration Appeals was feeling sorry for me, but the way they did their order, it said that the decision of the immigration judge is now final. It did not backdate to the finality of it. So I had the ability to ask for the judge to reopen the case. This was now final. You only have, I think, 90 days to ask the judge to reopen based on that now final wording, because he had relief. In fact, he was not deportable anymore because the law had changed. There was a case, a Ninth Circuit case, that said someone who was convicted of solicitation to possess cocaine, solicitation to possess, it's not a deportable offense. So he became not deportable completely. So it worked. And I told him, I called him in, and I said, look, I want to tell you what I did. I says, I think I've got it worked out, but if it isn't, then you're going to have to go somewhere else. I mean, I said, I want you to know this, because if you don't want me to continue to be your lawyer, that's going to be your choice too. No, but he did trust me. So everyone makes a mistake. The thing you have to remember is you have to face the consequences of that mistake, and that's why you have malpractice insurance. I mean, you don't want that to happen. I would hope that would never happen again. I don't know what happened. I can't figure that out. I must have read the numbers wrong. That's all I can think.
We had someone else say that too, about numbers, that's when they got into trouble.
Yeah, I think I must have read the number wrong, because I'm really careful about that. I cannot figure that out, but that was a big boo-boo.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll put those two side by side.
That's
They're
right.
like
Yeah.
perfect. They're like,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's really true.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and he said that someone saved, a it was like out of kindness that he got saved on
Well,
that
I'm
one.
thinking that, I called other attorneys. I said, tell me, I even contacted somebody in Washington who's there now. I says, tell me that I'm reading this wrong, but it looks like it says the decision is now final. That means I can move to reopen and it's in the jurisdiction, and they sent it back to the jurisdiction of the judge. So I gave the judge that language. And I told the trial attorney, I was very open about the whole thing. So everyone wants to get it fixed. Nobody wants to eat you up alive. They want to eat you up alive if they know you lied and tried to cover up. Otherwise, I think everyone wants to fix the situation. And this was very fixable.
I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
One, we're having trouble phrasing, and so I'm going to try it another way. First, we started out about we're trying to get at sort of how your personal belief system interacts with how you choose to practice law. Sort of whether that's faith or spirituality or philosophy or sort of how
Okay.
does that
You
make
mean
sense?
how I deal with people?
Sort
Or
of,
how I do my whole practice?
Yeah.
I think it kind of
Yeah.
fits in with mine. It has to do with just the person I am. It doesn't have to do with my religion, but it has to do with my moral feelings. I like to treat people the way I would want to be treated. I want to tell somebody something if I know something. I always look at the person on the other side of the table as what if I was sitting there, how do I want to be treated? And I tell them that. So that's how I practice law, and I've always practiced that way. I found an area that really fits my personality because it's kind of social work. You fix things, not always do you fix them, but often incredible cases. And I can tell about a couple of them where you can fix it and you feel so good about it at the end of the day. So it's got a social work component to it. You're doing a little law. It's a wonderful area of law in that way, okay? But my philosophy is that whether it's billing or communication or how I'm going to evaluate the case or how I put my time into it is I want to know I'm treating someone the way I would want to be treated, because I've dealt with lawyers too, and I've not always been happy with the way things have, the communication or the way, so I don't want that to happen again. It's not a perfect world. I just did a case, usually you want to resolve a green card before a young person turns 21. And this young man had been adopted by his aunt and uncle because his mother couldn't care for him. And adoption cases are kind of weird in immigration law. And and they raised him since he was an infant. He's been in the United States virtually all of his life. He lives in Nogales, Arizona. The family, I represented the father and a sister in getting their green card. And they told me at that time that they had this young man, but they had a problem. They had a problem. They adopted him. The final adjudication of the adoption took place after he was 16. But you cannot immigrate an adopted child if the adjudication of adoption took place after 16. It has to be before. Big problem. And that was not too long. It was right around the time I was talking to them. And so I looked it up. I looked something up, and I saw that in one of the books I used that a non-proton adoption has been accepted by immigration. It's not in the law, but it's out there. So I said, look, you have to find an attorney in Santa Cruz County. I had them meet with some here who can convince a judge to redo this case non-proton. Not sure how. I don't do adoption. You got to get it done. And you've got to get this all done before he turns 21, otherwise he's on like the waiting list. And this is a kid, believe it or not, who never worked unauthorized, couldn't get a driver's license, was just kind of here going to school, and there's a point where your life stops. You can't get a driver's license, can't work. Not sure. I mean, he seems very well adjusted, but wonderful parents. I get a call July 6th, and this is August 13th today, from the father. I hadn't talked to him in a while. He says, we finally got the non-proton adjudication last summer, and the attorney down there said he could take care of the immigration part, and these are really nice people, and it's fine. They didn't come to me. I don't care. I didn't say, why did you come to me? Maybe he gave them this package. I don't know what he charged them. But it wasn't someone that does immigration law all the time, so I'm not sure he understood how to present this. So they filed it, and really he dumped the package on them and said, okay, now file this. They filed it in September. The father calls me because he's concerned that the boy never got work permission. So I said, how old is he now? Well, he's going to be 21, August 12th, yesterday. I said, well, I think we have a bigger problem. This case has to be done before he turns 21. So they came up, they hired me. I sent this frantic fax to immigration and email, and I explained to them some of the issues, and I didn't hear from them for about a week, and then I called. I spoke to the officer in charge, and he says, oh, well, no, he gives me the case about retroactive. I says, well, that's not the case. Here's the case. He says, well, send me a brief. So I did this quick memo. It took like 2.5 pages with the cases, telling them it's this case, not this case, distinguishing the case. And then I get the call that from one of the supervisors that they were going to interview him. I thought, well, they could be giving me lip service too, but I felt like we're getting there. So they needed him fingerprinted first, and then I discovered he'd been arrested for consuming alcohol as a minor. You know, I'm telling him what this kid is so great, he is great anyway. Stupid stuff. So I got the parents to get the dispositions of those cases, and we went into the interview on Thursday, and he got his green card on Thursday. That's a great case. I love that case. Yeah, and I mean, it was an extra effort on my part. And I didn't say, give me $5,000. I charge him purely by the hour. This did not even cost him $1,000. I could have ripped him. I could have said, look, this is a lot of work. I had to do extra work, but I won't do that.
You changed his life.
Yeah, I changed this. This boy he got this card. I don't think his mother and his father, they were saying. He says, does this mean I can go to Nogales, Sonora now with this? I says, yes. His father would go down there and buy him tacos down there and bring him over because he only liked the tacos from down there. I says, yeah, you can go. He says, I can apply for a job now? I said, yes. I mean, it was incredible. It was just an incredible thing. It felt good. It was a great case.
Well, we usually end with happiest moments. I think seems
that
like
was.
that.
I have another one, but that
Okay.
one is that's a great moment. I felt really good for the family. Yeah.
So tell
What's your other
me-
one?
Yeah.
Huh?
Which
My
one?
other one?
The
Oh,
other
the other one. I got a call when I was state bar section chair. That's the other thing, get involved in state bar. It really helps. There are a lot of good people. Pima County Bar Association. That's a way to have mentors. That's a way to be doing the right thing in the community. I got a call. There were these illegals who they were in California and then they moved to Phoenix. They had custody of a little girl who was a U.S. citizen. I cannot believe it's going to rain and I didn't bring an umbrella in here. That's okay. It's thunder outside. What happened was they came to the United States from Veracruz, way down in Mexico, for a better life for their 2 boys when the boys were like 6 and 8. They went and lived in East LA with a lady called Sarah, who was a friend of the family, and Sarah took them in, and they were washing toilets, and they bought fake green cards, and they were doing what is done. And this is back in the maybe the early 90s, the 80s. And while they were living in this complex, this housing complex, there was this prostitute drug dealer who had a baby, and she was never around, and she was arrested. And Sarah and Yolanda, my client, were taking care of Mary Angel, the little child. And the mother was sent to prison. And Sarah thought, well, I'm going to try to adopt this kid. So she went to somebody, and he took her money, and I don't know whatever happened, but then Sarah had a stroke and died. Okay, so now Yolanda and Arturo are raising this little girl, Mary Angel, and also taking care of Sarah Townsend, her son, who's a U.S. citizen, and wonderful people. And Mary Angel was like their own. And when Mary Angel's mother got out of prison, she came back. And by now, Mary Angel's in school, 5 years old, and they gave her back to her mother, because that was the right thing to do, because these are... Mary Angel started doing strange things in school. CPS came in over there. She was acting out, making in her pants, and they came out to investigate. And they discovered that this mother is not the best mother for her. They don't ask the Moraleses what their status in the U.S. is, and they go into court, and they sever the relationship to the child, and the court deems it in the best interest of the Moraleses adopt this child. And when they get to the final time of adoption, and oh, by the way, then Mr. Morales gets a new job, a better job on his fake green card, and he gets sent to Phoenix, and they get moved to Phoenix. So the case for adoption is in California, but CPS in Phoenix is doing the home visits and making sure everything's okay. And CPS goes in one night to have dinner with these people, and she says, what's your status in the U.S.? And they say, we're illegal, because they didn't lie. They were incredible people. And she went ballistic with California, and everyone was all over the place. So California tried to get a hold of attorneys in Arizona, try to fix this. At that point, they'd been here illegally about 6 years. At that time in the law, there was a provision that if you've been here longer than 7 years and you were in deportation proceedings, that means putting them before the judge, you could ask for a thing called suspension of deportation by demonstrating the hardship to you and your children, but not to this little girl. She was not a qualifying relationship. Okay, so the issues about her are kind of not as important, although it does show their good moral character. So we had to wait a year. I told the family I would help them, I would do this, and I would do it pro bono, okay? And it was done in Phoenix. But we had to wait a year. So we waited out the year, and then I made an appointment, because immigration does not like to write these people up. You have to ask them to put them in proceedings. They don't like it. And you don't like to trick them into it, because then they might take them into custody and all kinds of other things. So I had to really make an arrangement with them and try to get a feel that they were sympathetic and not fight me too hard on this, if at all. And I made a notebook up of the whole, of just everything, you know, and everything about the family. And the attorney for immigration for this district said this is very compelling, and she agreed to have them written up. So we took them in, we had to have them fingerprinted, their pictures taken. These were nervous people, because I couldn't promise them I'd win. I mean, the judge could have a bad day. And so we went up there and we did that case, okay? And I did win that case, and they got their green card. It's a wonderful family. Even the boy, Richard, who's a Down syndrome boy, who was not a, he had everyone write letters about family. He wrote everyone's name on a piece of paper and wrote, "I love you." Okay, the judge, and even this is a judge, I cried. The judge was like this. The oldest boy was in high school in ROTC. So here's this illegal in this uniform. I had colored pictures of him in the uniform. The little girl wrote her letter in Spanish because she'd been raised by illegals, talking about how her illegal brothers were teaching her English. It was incredible. It was a great case. And it took 2 more years. It took a little while longer. She was finally adopted. Finally, was it 2 years ago? I got a letter and a phone call, and she changed her name to.
Ah,
That's really.
right.
That's it.
I'll get to that point. She didn't know who I was. Her family, she couldn't remember, because she was only, when we did the case, she was about 9, and now she's about 14. And she didn't know, but her mother explained it to her. And for this little girl, of course, her whole life changes, because now she's Morales. Her name was not even Morales at that time. And actually, the older boy, I don't know if he's still at ASU, but he went to ASU. This is a great family. This is a great case. So when you talk about illegals, you know, it's really unfair to say. I mean, the thing that they did do is they violated the law by coming up here, but that's about it. And maybe they bought a fake green card, you know. But you do what you got to do. I mean, they do what they've got to do. The law today would not have allowed for this case to happen, because the law has changed. And you have to have a qualifying relationship. Who is a U.S. citizen or green card holder? And there wouldn't have been. This would have been a big mess, because these are the only parents this little girl knew. So I don't know how we would have cleared that up. It would have been interesting to do it. But that's the best.
That's really cool. What about, we have one more question.
Sure.
We have Vicky's
Sure.
question.
Sure.
Giving.
Oh, about giving? Well, I've been, you know, when I got out of law school, I'm on the Law College Association, so I understand about giving. So, but I've always felt that you always give back to people who give you the opportunity to be able to do this. You know, someone let me into law school when I was 40 years old. I was not a political science major. I taught the deaf 20 years before, and I felt like I owed something to the school to give me the opportunity to do what I do. So I've always felt that you have to give back, and it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars, if it's $100 a year, but something every year. You ought to give something every year. There are 2 things. You ought to do that, and we ought to always do some pro bono work. And everyone can do pro bono work, I mean, in any area of law, you know, and that's real important. You ought to do that, because it just makes it feel good. You get a lot more out of those than you do out of the payments. So I do give back to the law school. You know, even though you feel like you couldn't wait to be out of here, and you hated every minute of it because it was so terrorizing, but they gave you the opportunity to be here. So I think that's, you know, and that's a big opportunity. That degree is a big deal.
Is it, is giving just about, I mean, money's very important, because money makes programs work.
Sure.
But is there other ways you give back?
Well, I agree to, you know, mentor, you know, if I can. Sometimes I'm not as good at that. The students have to get me. But you know, to be able to be available if there's a panel to be on, or for example, this thing, you know, is to give back the time. Yeah, absolutely. You should never forget your roots, that you didn't have it before, and that there were lots of people who applied at that time, and there's a lot of agonizing over who to let in and who not. That is an opportunity they have provided, and it's something we owe it to the school. You know, and there's always somebody you can think of. You know, I liked law school, and I But there will be things, that's normal. And there'll be bad days, you know, when you didn't do as well. There were bad days. There were a couple of bad days when I didn't do as well as I'd like to. But that's not to hold against somebody. It's a hard job for these people to do, you know, yeah.
Is that good?
Great.
Okay.
Okay.